Hello everyone, this is Padmanabh Reddy and welcome to Lit Critique. In this video, we'll be understanding what exactly a sonnet is. You might have heard this word called as a sonnet from the great English poet and dramatist William Shakespeare. He was the one who made this word popular. So now what exactly a sonnet is? So sonnet is a poetic form. So it is written in certain form which has certain rules. So we'll be looking at every single rule, and we'll be looking at different types of sonnets as well, namely the Shakespearean sonnet, the Petrarchan sonnet, and the Spenserian sonnet. All these three types of sonnets are really similar, but there are like little differences in them which make them different. So we'll be looking at all of these differences by examples of these types of sonnets. We'll be taking example of a Shakespearean sonnet, we'll be taking an example of a Petrarchan sonnet, we'll be taking an example of a Spenserian sonnet as well. We'll not get into every single detail of what the line says or what the symbolism and what exactly is a metaphors and everything that is being used by the poet. We'll just look at the form, we'll understand the form, we'll be taking up the exact and literal meaning in depth in other videos as well, but for this video, for the sake of this video, we'll be looking at the form. Before learning about all the three types of sonnets that I just mentioned, let us learn about the history of this type of poetry called as sonnet. The form of sonnet originated in the court of Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II in the 13th century. So the Italian poet Giacomo de Lentini, so he was a person who is credited with the invention of this form. He was a head of the Sicilian school of poetry, and he expressed courtly love through this form called as a sonnet. And this Sicilian school of poets at the court of Frederick II are credited with the spread of this form of sonnet to other languages as well, but unfortunately for us, the original sonnets and the early sonnets, not the original one, the early sonnets, they don't exist in their original Sicilian language, but they only exist to us in the Tuscan dialect that were translated by other poets. This is where we get this association of sonnets being love poetry, and also the English poets like Edmund Spenser, John Donne and William Shakespeare borrow this idea, borrow this form of sonnets from Italian poetry, and they write it in English, and that is where it gets really famous. If we get to the etymology of this word sonnet, it is derived from the Italian word sonetto, that means a little song, which is again in turn derived from the Latin word sonus, that means sound. During the Italian Renaissance, there lived this famous poet who made this form of sonnet really popular, was Francesco Petrarch. And he's known for his Italian sonnets. He's known for his sonnets which are by the distinct name of Petrarchan sonnets. And Petrarchan sonnets are really popular, that English poets like William Shakespeare, John Donne, Edmund Spenser and many others, they took this form from them. They were inspired by Petrarch's sonnets, and they took this form to English poetry and made it even more famous. As we have already looked into the history of this word called as a sonnet, let us now look into what exactly makes a sonnet, what is the form of the sonnet. So when we look at English sonnets, we have basically three rules. Again, I'm not talking about the Italian ones because the language is totally different. The syllable shapes are different. So when we get into the syllable shapes and all, that's totally a different topic. I'll tell you what a syllable is. But when we look into the English sonnets, we basically have three rules, and whichever poem fits into these three rules, that can be called as a sonnet. So the first rule is that every sonnet has to contain 14 lines. If a sonnet doesn't contain 14 lines, if it contains 13 or 15, it cannot be considered a sonnet at all. So this is the first rule. The second rule is that every sonnet has to follow a rhyme scheme. So the first line will rhyme with the third line, the third will rhyme with the sixth line or something like that. It has to follow a rhyme scheme. Like the first with second, or the second with third, or third with fourth, or fourth with fifth. So it goes on like that. So there is no specified rhyme scheme, but somehow or the other it has to follow some sort of rhyme scheme. So now let us understand what exactly this rhyme scheme is with the help of an example. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate, rough winds to shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lead had all too short a date. As we can look over here, the word day rhymes with May, the word temperate rhymes with date. So this becomes a rhyme scheme of A, B, A, B. These are the first 4 lines of a sonnet named as Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day by William Shakespeare, which has a rhyme scheme of A, B, A, B. And the other sonneteers that I mentioned earlier, namely Petrarch and Spenser, they have a different rhyme scheme, and I'll discuss those rhyme schemes when we'll get there. The third rule is that every sonnet has to be written in a meter. And what exactly is a meter now? Meter is a rhythmic form in which a poem is written, and in English it's usually the iambic pentameter, although it's not a compulsion, but mostly in English it is written in iambic pentameter. And now what is an iamb and what is a pentameter? So to understand an iamb, we have to understand what exactly a syllable is. A syllable is the lowest unit of the word, which is counted by its vowel sound, and a word can contain one or more syllables according to its shape as well as according to the vowels in it. And now when we get to iambic pentameter, so we have to understand what exactly is an iamb is. So iamb is a combination of a short syllable and a long syllable. So again, some people call it a stress and unstressed syllable, or rather unstressed and stress. So a short syllable is usually an unstressed syllable and a long syllable is a stressed syllable. So for this video's sake, we'll call them as long and short only, not the stress and unstressed. Do not get you guys confused. So when we look at the short syllable and long syllable, when they combine together, it forms an iambic foot. And when a line contains 5 such iambic feet, it becomes an iambic pentameter. So now what exactly a line contains, how many syllables that the line contains? So 1 iambic feet, that means 2 syllables. So now when we have 5 feet in one line, that means we have 10 syllables in a line, which are based harmonically as long, as short and long, short, long, short, long, and so on. Like we have 10 syllables. So this makes an iambic pentameter. I know you guys might not have gotten the point till now. So if you haven't gotten the point till now, let me explain it to you more vividly by an example. I'll take the same 4 lines from the sonnet, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, and I'll explain it to you how iambic pentameter works in a line and how iambic pentameter is fitted by the poet into these lines. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate, rough winds to shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. I can read this in a different way as well. This is one way of reading it. I have a different way of reading it. I can read it as Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Now we can count the iambic feet in every line. So it goes like this: Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Now you can see in every line we have 5 feet. That makes it 10 syllables in every single line. And this goes out throughout the poem. I hope you understood what I meant by iambic pentameter and the rhythmic pattern in the sonnet. So this is what Shakespeare loved a lot. He wrote many of his dramas in iambic pentameter as well. When we look at Romeo and Juliet, much of Romeo and Juliet is written in iambic pentameter, and Shakespeare loved this form very, very much. A typical form of the Italian sonnet of that time consisted of 2 parts that made up the argument. The first part, called as the octet, that contains 8 lines and it contained a proposition. The second part, called as sestet, which usually contained 2 tercets, that means 6 lines total. Like sestet is called as 6 lines and the tercet is 3 lines. So 2 tercets make up a sestet, that is 6 lines. So total 8 plus 6 makes up 14. And now a sestet here contains the resolution to the problem, a proposition that was put forward in the octet. Now, mostly in those sonnets, what happened was the ninth line marked a shift in the tone of the poem or a shift towards a resolution, which was called as volta. Although all the sonnets don't follow this form of having a proposition first, then a resolution later, but most sonnets follow the ninth line of having a volta that indicates a shift of the mood or indicates a shift of the whole tone of the poem. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate, rough winds to shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease had all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Before we get into the explanation of this sonnet, although we'll not be getting into every single excruciating detail into this sonnet, we'll only be looking at the outline of the meaning. But before going to that, let us now look at the form of this sonnet. Going by the three rules that I just mentioned earlier, we can look that this actually qualifies as a sonnet. The first rule I mentioned was that every sonnet has to contain 14 lines. And when we count the lines of this sonnet, we get 14. So our first rule is totally fulfilled. The second rule I mentioned was it should contain a rhyme scheme for sure. So let us now look if this sonnet actually has a rhyme scheme. The word day, that rhymes with May. The word temperate rhymes with date. The word shines rhymes with declines. The word dimmed rhymes with untrimmed. The word fade rhymes with shade. The word oust rhymes with grouse. The word see rhymes with thee. So what is the rhyme scheme over here? We have A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, and G, G. For the third rule that I talked about, that a sonnet should be written in a poetic meter, most preferably iambic pentameter. This sonnet is written in iambic pentameter, and I have deciphered the first 4 lines, and I have shown you how iambic pentameter works in these first 4 lines, and it exactly works the same way in all the 14 lines as well. You can rewind the video back to the point where I discuss these 4 lines, and you will get to see how this poem is written in exact iambic pentameter. This is such a beautiful poem that I want to speak an hour about this, but unfortunately I'll not be taking that much time because I have to discuss other 2 types of sonnets as well. But we'll be taking up this sonnet in another class, in another video. But for this, I'll just tell you the gist of what is happening in this sonnet. Here Shakespeare is writing a love poem, and in the first line he's telling, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Like he's talking to his beloved that shall I compare you to a summer's day? And he talks about her physical beauty, as well as he tells that, oh, okay, although you're really beautiful, but the life actually when it progresses, beauty actually declines. Now here what I mean by beauty is beautiful body, the beautiful face and the facial features. It's not about the concept of beauty that Plato talks about. Here Shakespeare is talking about the beautiful face and the bodily kind of beauty. He tells that with age that thing actually goes away, but again later he tells that okay, even though you go away, you are totally immortal because your beauty won't die. Now when he talks in the sestet, in the 9th line, he tells that okay, your beauty won't fade away, it will remain with us. Now here what he's telling is the beauty over here is not the kind of the bodily beauty he talked about in the octet. In the sestet, he is talking about the form of beauty, the concept of beauty. The last 2 lines are the most beautiful lines in this poem. He tells that okay, even though death wins over life, even though death has an upper hand and it takes you away, but still you will remain immortal because you will be remembered by the lines of this poem, and I'm making you immortal. Like not exactly over here I'm making you immortal, but you will stay immortal with the lines of this poem. This is again really a philosophical idea that a man or a woman can live with the works that are written by him or written to that person by another person. So the person whom he is addressing, Shakespeare whom he is addressing, that person is now dead, but we are now thinking about that person again. So what does that make that person? Is that person immortal or is that person not immortal? But this is again a philosophical idea that what exactly is death? Is death something that happens with the closing of your eyes, with the shutting down of your organs and you degrading to the soil, or is it something kind of removing your memories away from somebody's brain? So this is a philosophical idea that Shakespeare talks about in this poem. I swear I want to talk more and more about this poem, but we'll be running out of time if I talk more and more, deciphering every single line. One day I wrote her name upon the strand, but came the waves and washed it away. Again I wrote it with a second hand, but came the tide and made my pains his prey. Vain man, said she, that dost in vain essay a mortal thing so to immortalized, for I myself shall like to this decay, and eke my name be wiped out likewise, not so could I. Let baser things devise to die in dust, but you shall live by fame. My verse your virtues rare shall eternize, and in the heavens shall your glorious name, where when as death shall all the world subdue, our love shall live and later life renew. Again, let us look that if this poem by Edmund Spenser actually is a sonnet or not. Let us now look by the three rules. The first rule that I mentioned, it should have 14 lines. A poem should have 14 lines to make it a sonnet. Now when we count all the lines of this poem, we get 14. Now the first rule is satisfied. Now let us look into the second rule, that every sonnet has to contain a rhyme scheme. Now let us look if this sonnet has a rhyme scheme. Here the word strand rhymes with the word hand, away rhymes with prey, assay rhymes with decay, immortalize rhymes with likewise, devise rhymes with eternize, fame rhymes with name, subdue rhymes with renew. So we have A, B, A, B, B, C, B, C, C, D, C, D, E, E. So the second rule is satisfied. So now let us look into the third rule, that every single sonnet has to be written in a poetic meter, most preferably iambic pentameter. So now let us decipher the first 4 lines of the sonnet. I'll not decipher every single line over here. You can use the same trick and you can decipher every single line. The first 4 lines, let us decipher them. One day I wrote her name upon the strand, but came the waves and washed it away. Again I wrote it with a second hand, but came the tide and made my plans his prey. Let us look into the numbering of the first line of the poem. One day I wrote her name upon the strand. So you can see that in the first line and in every single line that follows, it has 5 iambic feet and as a result 10 syllables to it. And this is a case with every single line in this poem, which makes it a sonnet. So the third rule is also satisfied. So we have all the 3 rules that are satisfied, and this exactly is a sonnet. If you might have noticed the difference between the form between the Shakespearean sonnet and the Spenserian sonnet, you might have looked at the rhyme scheme. The Shakespearean sonnet rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F and G, G. The Spenserian sonnet's rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B, B, C, B, C, C, D, C, D and E, E. Even this sonnet is really beautiful. I want to speak a lot about this sonnet as well. I'll be speaking about it in a different video. I promise you I'll be making a different video about this particular sonnet. This is so beautiful. I'll not be going into every single excruciating detail in this sonnet, but even in this sonnet, it has the same form the old Italian sonnets. The first 8 lines, the octet has a proposition and in the sestet there is a solution or a resolution. In this sonnet, the poet is writing the name of his beloved on the beach, but the waves come by and it gets erased. He does it 3 or 4 times, but there is no use of it. It gets erased every single line. Now his beloved comes by and she says, okay, I'm really mortal. Now what you will do by writing my name? I'm not immortal. I have to die one day. Now this is the first part, the octet. The second part, the sestet, the poet tells that, oh no, you are not mortal. Like, you might be mortal in a physical sense, that you will die, you will leave this world physically, but I will write poems that will immortalize you. This is the same kind of philosophy that Shakespeare had in the earlier poem, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day? Now even here he is telling that every time somebody reads these lines, they will remember you. So you are getting immortal over here. The eyes I spoke of once in woods that burn, the arms and hands and feet and lovely face that took me from myself for such a space of time and marked me out from other men, the waving hair of unmixed gold that shone, the smile that flashed with the angelic rays that used to make this earth a paradise, are now a little dust, all feeling gone, and yet I live, grief and disdain to me, left where the light I cherished never shows, in fragile bark on the tempestuous sea. Here let my loving song come to a close, the vein of my accustomed art is dry, and this my lyre turned at last to tears. Before checking that this poem actually makes a sonnet or not, let me just remind you that this is a translation of the original poem by Petrarch, which was written in Italian. This is translated into English. So there is a metrical change, but this exact translation is in iambic pentameter. And I'll tell you how, but before that, let us look into the first two rules. The first rule, as I mentioned, that every sonnet has to contain 14 lines. So if we count all the lines of this poem, it gets to 14. So the first rule is now satisfied. If you look at the second rule, that every single sonnet has to have a rhyme scheme to it. Now let us check if this poem actually contains a rhyme scheme. The word burn rhymes with men. The word face rhymes with space, shone with gone, race with paradise, meet with sea, close with tears. So we have the rhyme scheme A, B, B, A, B, B, A, C, D, E, C, D, E. In the sense that we don't see rhyming, this is because it is a translation of the original poem, and when it is translated, some rhymes have to go to make it really meaningful. For the third rule that I mentioned, that every single sonnet has to be written in a poetic meter, most preferably an iambic pentameter, but this sonnet is written in Italian. And Italian sonnet, when it gets translated, it loses its original meter. But here it is translated such that it is written in iambic pentameter. So let me decipher the first four lines for you. The eyes I spoke of once in words that burn, the arms and hands and feet and lovely face that took me from myself for such a space of time and marked me out from other men. Now let us count the iambic feet in the first line. The eyes I spoke of once in words that burn. So we have 5 iambic feet. So this makes iambic pentameter, thus 10 syllables in a line. So we have even the third rule satisfied. So this means this poem actually makes a sonnet. Even this poem is really beautiful and it requires a lot of time to do justice with it. But let me tell you the gist of what is exactly happening. And Petrarch is such good writer that you have to read till the end to get what exactly he's telling. This poem undergoes many shifts through its course. And in the octet, Petrarch tells about a lady and her divine grace and her angelic qualities to us. But as soon as he completes the octet, he tells that she is no more, and all the poetry that he writes, whom he was inspired to write by her, she inspired him to write poetry. Now she is no more, and the poetic ink that he has, that is now running dry. And this is really sad poem, and by the end he tells that the lyre, a musical instrument, it is now only crying tears. It is not now getting all the happy songs that that used to play when she was alive. And this is really sad poem, and I want to spend a lot of time, but I promise you I'll make a separate video for this sonnet as well. The Renaissance had many such poets like Ben Jonson, Christopher Marlowe, Sir Walter Raleigh, William Shakespeare, and many other guys who wrote exemplary sonnets. And even the sonnets are continued to this day, but they are broken many conventions. But still this day, many literary scholars agree on this point that those are the 3 original rules that a sonnet is based on. And those rules, if any poem breaks those 3 rules, it is not considered a sonnet at all. Let us now quickly recap about what we have learned about all the 3 rules and the 3 types of sonnets. The first rule is that every sonnet has to contain 14 lines. The second rule is that every sonnet has to have a rhyme scheme. The third rule is that every sonnet has to be written in a poetic meter, preferably iambic pentameter. The rhyme scheme of a Shakespearean sonnet is A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. The rhyme scheme of a Spenserian sonnet is A, B, A, B, B, C, B, C, C, D, C, D, E, E. The rhyme scheme of a Petrarchan sonnet is A B B A, A B B A, C D E, C D E. I hope you have understood what exactly a sonnet is and also the subtle differences between a Shakespearean, Spenserian and a Petrarchan sonnet. There are many other kinds of sonnets as well, like only the change in the rhyme scheme. Dante did a different rhyme scheme, and also many other writers did different rhyme schemes as well. If you read many other writers, you will get to know all the other rhyme schemes as well. If you like this video, please do leave a like, and if you have any doubts, please put them in the comment box down below. I'll be reading all your doubts. I'll be clearing all of them as well. Please do subscribe to Lit Critique and all of its social media handles. This is Padmanabh Reddy from Lit Critique signing off. Bye bye.